Okay, welcome to Wednesday afternoon. Mike, do you want to do these executive sessions first? Is that your
Yes, if we
preference?
could, yeah.
Okay. So we're going to take them all three at the same time?
If
you
we
think?
could, yes.
Yeah. Contract negotiations, 5 minutes, real estate purchase lease, 15 minutes, and contract negotiations, 10 minutes.
Correct.
Okay, let's do that.
Thank you.
The board is extending the executive session for a period of 10 minutes until 2:12 p.m.
Okay, we're back from executive session. No decisions were rendered. I think it looks like we have a couple more items.
We do. Mike Moss, Public Services Director. Next item I have is parking lot maintenance. So as we've talked quite a bit about the north parking lot here between north of admin, removing trees, all that fun stuff. So this is the weekend we start the work. Removing the trees or starting to remove the trees on Friday, Saturday and Sunday. We're going to email out to staff later this afternoon. So this is phase one. So we're going to remove and replace the trees, also remove the stumps, upgrade the light poles, grind and pave the parking lot, replace the curbs, stripe the parking lot, and clean or remove that white vinyl fence. So Briny Tree Service is doing the work along with Public Works starting on Friday. Like I said, it'll take 3 weekends to us to remove those trees and the stumps. We'll put some barricades out Thursday evening. So we'll have nobody in that parking lot over this weekend. So
But when Monday rolls around, they'll be able to roll
exactly, they'll
back
be
in
able to
there.
get back in there. Yeah, we'll make sure it's open for the work week. We'll send out a press
It'll
release
certainly
tomorrow.
look different. won't it?
Yeah, it will. We've got a few people already concerned about it. We did reach out to the city of Castle Rock because we don't know exactly what direction we want to take on the trees yet for replacement wise. Commissioner Dahl told me that the city of Castle Rock's redoing some landscaping mainly on Huntington Avenue. They gave me some suggestions of trees that they're replacing it with. They're the afterburner black gum tree is what they're replacing by the elementary school in Castle Rock. And that tree, it states here,
It's supposed to have roots that go down.
exactly, this tree roots grow deep into the ground and won't ruin your beautiful landscape or crack your sidewalks and driveway. Plus, many wildfire black gums live for more than 70 years, and they're kind of an orange-looking tree. So after we disturb this north lot over the next 3 weekends, we're going to take a good look to see, are we going to do something with planters in that middle area, or if we're actually going to just keep it a green space and plant these type of trees there. Either way, there'll be trees in place to replace these ones, but we'll figure out what we're up against once we start tearing into there. So either way, it'll look a lot better. Initially, people will be a little disappointed, especially this time of year. You know, if you take the trees out in December when they look bad, it's not a big deal, but now they're beautiful green trees and now all of a sudden we'll.
I know if they're all leaved out, they look kind of nice.
They do.
There you go.
Exactly. So, but it has to be done. You know, you guys been in the north parking lot, you can see the damage it does.
You just tell anybody, that's Commissioner District number 1.
We'll do that.
You're not adding any parking spaces, just redoing what's there.
Correct. Yeah.
Good.
Exactly right. So, yeah, that this weekend. So
That'll
we'll
look
be ready
nice.
for complaints.
It'll
We
look
know they're
nice
coming
when
our
it's all
way, so.
done. You know, when that's all done and that lot is smoothed out and stuff, that'll be nice.
yeah, it will be. It's still, as you all know, a city street in there that we're not touching at this point. So and I don't think the city of Kelso is moving forward with any projects
But
in that
that's-
area.
Kelso, right?
That's correct.
And we can't really touch it.
No.
Yeah.
So, but maybe they'll feel bad after our parking lot looks so good that they'll want to improve their street.
Yeah.
Check the weather, you sure it's not gonna rain,
Just a little bit. That's fine. Keep the dust down. So I believe the next one is Susan with Army Corps of Engineers.
Good afternoon, Susan Eugenius, County Engineer. I'm glad you guys took a long time on an executive session so I can talk really fast and confuse you. I will give you a kind of a brief rundown. So last week, the Army Corps held their annual meeting with the diking districts to discuss the results of the 2024 bathymetric survey. So I printed out 5 of the slides that were presented during that meeting, and I'll give you kind of the rundown. So the first sheet you have shows the 2 maps where it shows the cross-section locations and then what their level of protection is for each diking area. So there are 4 diking areas that they have level of protection authority over. The Castle Rock district where they have authority for, so hydrologists have gone away from the 100-year storm and we're now doing probability. So we're used to hearing that they have a level of protection for the 118-year storm. And that just means that it's supposed to occur once in every 118 years. Now they're calling it the 0.85% chance of occurrence every year, because you can have a 118-year storm every year. Well, then you have to change your data, but you can have 2 in the same year or multiple years. So they want to get away from that nomenclature. So Castle Rock has the 0.85% chance of occurrence, formerly known as 118 years. Lexington has 167 years, which is the 0.6% chance of occurrence. Kelso, which includes both North and South Kelso, has a 0.7 chance of recurrence, which is 143 years. And then Longview is 167 years like Kelso. So slide 4 has the graph that shows both what the authorized level of protection, which are the dashed lines down towards the bottom of the graph, and what they have tracked since 2009. As you can see, Kelso and Longview are the 2 lines up at the top, which is the 500-year protection, which is the 0.2% chance of reoccurrence. And the 2 lower lines are Castle Rock and Lexington. Most notably, if you look from 2022 moving forward, both have seen a decline in the level of protection, but they are still both above the authorized level. So I have a bunch more slides than you guys do, talking about what the hydraulic year looked like and information about the sediment plain, but I knew we had a short time and how the SRS is performing. So I moved on to sedimentation in the Cowlitz River, because I know this is a topic that a lot of people are talking about. So that 3rd slide shows the reach from just north of Castle Rock, so from the mouth of the Toutle all the way down to the Columbia River. The little red lines are where they take cross sections. And then it has some information about points of interest along the river, which shows the year that Castle Rock upgraded its levee for a seepage cutoff wall, the island bar deposits that have grown north of Castle Rock, which has caused 50 feet of bank erosion since 2013. The pinch point, which is down just north of here at Rocky Point, so in between Lexington and North Kelso. And that pinch point is where we transition to our really sandy gravel bars down here, where the sandy bars that are more like sand dunes down at this mouth of the river, because the grade drops. And so we have much more finer sediments. So if you jump to the next page, this is that cross section where the bar has formed. So they've included a couple pictures, and they've included the cross-section from 2013 to 2024, and you can see how it has changed. So in 2013, which is a blue, you can see that in the center of the cross-section, it was at a low point, and since then it has added about 5 feet of sediment since those first 2 years. And you can see how the river is shifting to the right bank, that everybody is noticing the erosion, and it's also shift to the left bank. So that's why when the Corps says there's the same volume available for the river, this is what they're referring to. Yes, they're recognizing that we do have a bar in the river now, but this is why they're saying we still have the same capacity to move water down the river. I always refer to the Cowlitz as a toddler because it is a young river due to the eruption, so it's still trying to find its path where it wants to be. The next 2 slides, or the last slide that I included, is cross sections down here at the mouth of the river where you can see how the Thalweg moves around with the shifting channel. Just kind of a reference so that you can see, yes, we have sandbars where we didn't have them before, but some of the old ones we have disappeared, so the capacity of the river has not changed significantly. So they are about to go out for their request for proposals for the monitoring for 2025. I know that was really fast, and I'm sure there's questions.
If the level of protection dips below a certain level, 100 years or 125, whatever the threshold is, it automatically trigger dredging or other avenues?
So the supplemental EIS for the Mount St. Helens project, I don't believe it's in the whole packet, but I can pull, there's a decision matrix in that report where if it hits this threshold, they're supposed to raise the SRS, which they've started the design on because they see that downward trend. And then there's also a decision if it reaches a certain level that they would come out and dredge. I don't have that at my fingertips, but they have a decision matrix in that supplemental EIS that they did. Oh, yes, I do have it. It's just really tiny and it's not included in what I handed out to you, and I can't read that. I'd need a magnifying glass, but I can bring that decision matrix and share it with the commissioners that they have in place that's supposed to trigger their actions.
Yeah, I know I'm just a country bumpkin and don't understand a lot of the stuff, but when I look at these 100 years, 167 years, I'm like, could you get the weather right in 48 hours? Those types of things I look at, and I'm not sure how much to really put in stock to put into this when we can't get the 5-day forecast correct. So. that's neither here
And
nor
it
there.
boggles people's mind because it is a model. So it's only as good as the data that you put into it. And so every year we get another data point. So every year what the 167-year storm is changes. So let's take for 1996, for example, originally that was supposed to be a 100-year storm, but as they did more analysis, oh no, that was not a 100-year storm. They backed off on the number to it's a 93-year storm, I think is what they're saying now. So as they get more data and add more information, the model will change. And so what was a 100-year storm is no longer a 100-year storm because we have more data points. And that is actually one of the things that the Corps is requesting, because the model that they're running with right now only has the data in it. So when they model the water surface elevation, only has water surface data through 20, I believe it's 10. Might be 13, but we're missing the big event in 2015 and the subsequent years. So one of the things that the Corps would like to do moving forward, in addition to the bathymetric study, is to get enough funding that they can revise the model to include that extra data that we've been collecting through the years. So the water surface elevation is based on and the storm event is based on the rainfall and what you're seeing in the stream gauges. So currently, there's a gauge across the river here in Kelso. There's the Castle Rock gauge so the one in Kelso, NOAA operates. There's a Castle Rock gauge and a Tootle gauge that USGS operates in 2017. I might be wrong on the year, plus or minus 2 years. Lexington Flood Control Zone District had a gauge installed that is continuous monitoring that ecology monitors. So they're getting more and more data, and so they want to refine the model.
Is that a little bit on the conversation we had with David Hodges the other day, where when they asked for that, that would be the time where we try and get him to expand to look at river migration and erosion type things?
So yes and no. So once they get, so their authorization, they can update that model as part of their authorization for the level of protection. I believe in some of the conversations we've had, David, not this week, but previous ones, we were talking about updating the WRDA, which is the
Yeah.
water resources, and that would be when you ask them to include the river migration, but start setting that seed now. I believe WRDA will be reauthorized next year.
Next year, I think, is when it's coming up.
Yeah, so we would need to start working on that sometime soon to start saying, hey, we need this reauthorized to include these additional items.
Well, I think one of the things that you said with the river still trying to find its path is largely because of all the dredge spoils. It's going to wash it into the river. And now you have a river, instead of being, I don't know, 60 feet wide, 30 feet deep, now all of a sudden it's 120 feet wide and 15 feet deep. So your water level's still the same, but it's spread out a hell of a lot wider.
Yeah.
And it's washing away the sediment and stuff that they pumped out of the river is now going back into the river. But I don't agree with their logic. But
It's more of the sediment is defining the path.
Yeah.
yeah,
Mhm.
the sediment they put out there. And we can't do anything about restricting. Yeah.
So that's my short version of what I found out from the Corps. I'm also working with the Corps. They did reach out about starting to look for potential dredge spoil sites to set up a preliminary meeting. So I'm trying to get that arranged also. In case they hit that trigger where we have to dredge the river. So you two have not been involved in it, but we, the county. So the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers can only have agreements with the state. So in the 80s, the initial agreement was with the state of Washington. Sometime between 85 and the early 90s, the state delegated through an interlocal agreement, the county to be the representative with the Corps. So that is why I am the Corps' contact for this project, because the state has delegated it to the county. So we have an existing agreement with the state because they are the ones responsible for paying for finding the dredge spoil sites. And they are responsible for the fish handling that goes on in relation to the SRS. So I've reached out to the state to get involved in this meeting because what happens is the county, or what happened in the past, the county went out and did the negotiations and the purchases, and the state paid for it. And that is how the existing agreement stands. I have also reached out to the state because that agreement expires in June to get that moving to either be reauthorized or they need to take back the responsibility.
So did you say that the Corps would be responsible for finding sites to dredge spoils? Who's responsible for that?
The local sponsor, which is the state, who's delegated it to us,
To
Cowlitz
us.
County. So the original sites were found at that time in the 80s. WashDOT Real Estate did all of the contract negotiations, and they, since that time, they said, no, don't want to be doing that. So once the SRS was built, they kind of put it on the counties. So the local sponsor is responsible for finding the dredge spoil sites, handling all the environmental permits and those requirements, which is why the state does the fish handling. And when they dredge, the local sponsor is responsible for dewatering of the dredge spoils, because obviously it comes out as a slurry, so you have to have enough property set aside for it to drain out and handle the water that comes out of it.
And how many options do we have to handle that now?
Right now, we do not have a whole lot of options, especially, I mean, from Kelso to Castle Rock, we're have very few options. I mean, we honestly don't. I mean, we have Owl Point down here at the mouth. That would probably take some. I said that wrong, Owl Point. That's not the right name of it anymore. But what we're going to find upstream is going to be difficult. And that's the situation we're in.
Since the mountain went, we've built homes on all those places.
Mhm.
Is that a reimbursement program that the state pays for? Or,
Yes,
so we pay for it out of pocket and then they reimburse it?
yes, that's the way it was originally set up. Because right now, we do maintain and manage, there's 4 to 6, I don't have the exact number in my head anymore, monitoring sites that we maintain easements for the Corps to access. And every year, we cut a check to the property owners, and we get reimbursement from the state.
I'm just trying to think of so once the dredge spoils go onto the bank, those people's properties, who's responsible for the dredge spoils?
It becomes theirs, so they can sell it and do with it as they want.
Becomes the property owner?
Yes.
They own it? Okay.
Yes, and there is a unique state law that dredge spoils from the Cowlitz River do not have to pay the natural resources, whatever, I think it's $1 a ton for those materials. It was something that was lobbied very hard for by this county to put in there so people would accept the dredge spoils, because if you dig it out on your property and you get paid $1.35 a cubic yard, you do not have to give anything to the state. The dredge spoils that say that the Port of Woodland sell, that come out of the Columbia, they do owe royalties to the state. So it's a very unusual quirk and it's just on from dredge spoils from the Toutle River and the Cowlitz River south of the mouth of the Toutle. Anything else that's a dredge spoil, you owe royalties to the state.
I don't know, is the old, on the DeRozier site,
Mm-hmm.
is that still in use? Over there?
I believe it is.
Is it? Okay.
What's that? Yeah, and we are working on selling the dredge spoils out of Cook Ferry. I mean, the county can sell all the dredge spoils out of Cook Ferry. The caveat for the county was we don't have to pay those royalties, but all the money that proceeds that what we receive has to go into the Parks Department because it's on the public lands. So, but we can build some great soccer fields and fishing piers.
Gotta find a use for that stuff and get it going.
Anything else?
Thank you.
Okay,
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thanks.
I see we have our guests. I need just to put a break and we'll get Bobbitt and Shauna up there.
Thank you, guys. whole this thing here, you know, the
I watched the WTFW video. Oh, it's good. You're in development for. Yeah.
So- We're good to go?
We're still recording, are we?
Yeah. Yeah, it was fun having them in. Yeah. Okay. I don't know, if we have a huge agenda, but it's always nice to touch base on a regular basis. I do want to publicly thank you for the help when we were working with PUD and trying to arrange that. It's a little deeper than just a money issue, and I think PUD needs to work some of that out, but the help you gave to at least get to Chad, I think, we appreciate that. Appreciate that help.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a really helpful conversation for me too, to directly talk to the PUD and hear how complicated and how many factors were going into that project.
Yeah, they had a lot going on, a lot more going on than I understood
Yeah.
at the beginning, yeah.
Yep. And that's really important for us to know too, right? If you're going to have a project like that, try to get across the finish line, you kind of have to find all the resources and, put a big old puzzle together
Yeah,
in the right sequence and have the right timing. And, unfortunately, the additional funds from the state weren't going to get there, but, always is good to have the governor's office attention on something like this and
yeah,
get everybody at the table and try to see at least. And if anything else down the road, there's awareness and that opens up doors. So.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Mhm.
You guys got anything new that you wanted to touch on? Or you,
I think Shauna has some updates maybe on the collaborative work.
Yeah,
we just, you probably heard us just kind of went over Army Corps'.
they met with you this week, correct? Is that,
Well, it just
the
came
Corps?
from Susan. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
last week? Okay, yeah. I heard just through the collaborative that was, that they were gonna be meeting with you, sharing some information about levels of protection and all that, so, yeah. So yesterday we had our meeting of the Rivers Need Room work group that's part of the collaborative. I think I mentioned this at our last meeting a few months ago. It's a smaller, just, semi-formal work group we've got, Porta Longview, Adam from Building and Planning, Larry Hembry's on there, someone from the Cowlitz Indian Tribe, Lower Columbia Estuary Partnership, Fish Recovery Board. So pretty good representation of kind of the key issues, basically just to talk through things that we can actually do in the lower Toutle and Cowlitz, because the collaborative is really about information sharing. It hasn't led to a lot of, there have been some actions. There's a lot of work, as I think you all know about the stuff going on in like the North Fork Toutle around the sediment retention structure, upriver from that. Of course, all the Spirit Lake stuff that's going on for updating that, or like fixing some issues with it, with the Forest Service, fish collection facility. But this is really more those down river areas, where the sediment is, piled up in the,
Yeah.
and causing water quality, bank stabilization problems, property damage. So really looking at, some things that we can do to actually do something. So we had a meeting yesterday in Longview, had a good meeting. We basically came up with like our kind of our vision statement. It's our fourth meeting. And then started working on next steps for the, and I know the Council of Governments, Bill Fashing and Sam are taking a lead on basically looking at some potential commercial use of the dredge material, right? And that stuff that you were just talking about, right? That finding a use for would be really nice. Getting it out of the floodplain, both for restoration and in some cases, fish habitat, but also just opening up, broadening that floodplain. You're basically, if we can't do dredging in that lower river, at least opening up the floodplain, it does allow for more water to flow, right? In a flood event. Anyway, so looking at things we can do with the dredge material. We're looking at some community engagement opportunities as well, to try and get the public's perspective on what are some projects that would be important. And just kind of not like looking at it just from the expert perspective, but what do the people that live there, what are they concerned about? What would they like to see done so we can, to kind of help us prioritize. Those were some of the things that we talked about at the meeting. So it's been encouraging. It feels like an opportunity to really be able to talk to people about the issues and, actually come up with some kind of a path forward. So.
Sounds like a smaller group and probably easier to do that.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
On that note, I would just say, I'm making a trip south to Vancouver with the new director for ecology. And, it's a pretty tight schedule, but I'm gonna try to take a quick detour, on our way back north, to go to the site that we looked at, right next to the
Out by the gun range there?
Yep. Mhm.
Yeah.
And just give them a snapshot of kind of what it looks like and talk about some of the issues that we've been talking about to raise that, just for his awareness and, what we're trying to accomplish here with the collaborative and other work groups, as well as working with you and trying to find solutions that might work. So, I might just not ask and take a quick detour with him, but again, it kind of just depends on how the day plays out. He's got a family trying to get back to too.
Well,
So
tell him it's not that far off the road.
it's not,
No,
right?
you're
It's
right there.
there. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'll just tell him we're stopping for chips or something.
Yeah.
and just keep going past the gas station.
Gas. You gotta stop for gas.
Yeah.
Don't fuel up on the way down.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, something like that. But I want to give you a heads up that this is something that that of course is a priority. That's why we're here and continuing to work with you on this and try to, elevate it to that level too, just for awareness. And I've already talked to him about this, but I think it's just is different when you see it on the ground. It's just, seeing the landscape, seeing the magnitude, especially things are just changing so rapidly in those areas. So
Visuals always work best
yeah.
for me. I'm one of those type of people, so.
Yeah.
That works. So he's pretty new. He came in with the new administration.
Yep. Yeah, it's been really great. He's got such a background. He was previously the EPA Region 10 administrator. So very familiar with our portfolio of work, a little different role. He's been, really getting his feet underneath him for the legislative session for the past couple months. So he jumped right in. This is his first position in the state government. So was learning a lot there, had to get, confirmed and all that too. And but now things are starting to taper off with session. And so he's starting to get out now. He wants to really see the region. He wants to meet partners. So we've been trying to put together different programs for him. This one is he's going to be doing a presentation for the Association of Washington Businesses Conference on May 14th. So that's why we're going down for that. But I'm trying to take some stops along the way. We're going to stop in the Chehalis at the Port of Chehalis to talk about
Yeah.
their business efforts and some really cool stuff going on there. And then use that opportunity to talk about the office for Chehalis Basin work around trying to comprehensively address flood risk there. And then, come down, go to the Vancouver field office and do the presentation with the AWB and then hopefully on the way back, kind of stop and take a look at some of the lower Toutle.
You're meeting with the chamber also, some chamber
Yep.
leaders, right?
The Greater Vancouver Chamber we're meeting with, the director there, and then also the mayor as well. So, yeah, it'll be a packed agenda, but
Yeah, well, keep them busy.
yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Just for my own curiosity, and I guess I've never really explored it, what's EPA, your relationship with Fed to state? I mean, is it, they give you directive? Or does the state have some ability to do their own directive per state? I guess I've never really explored how that all works.
I might relate it to state, local,
Okay.
similar kind of partnership there. The federal government has certain jurisdiction over certain regulatory processes where the state doesn't. And there's also certain federal regulations that we are also delegated under our authority. So we carry out some of that for the federal government as well, which is embedded in our regulations as a state. So I would say it's a state-federal partnership. We work through issues. It's a partnership, just like it is our state-local partnership. So something like that is kind of how I'd describe it.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about legislation. I sent a couple of notes because I was looking at the website. They're updating floodplain rules to try and help people build a little faster. I'm just kind of
Yeah.
getting the gist of it, and I was kind of
Yeah.
interested in what that would look like or mean.
So I remember seeing that, I think last week when it came out and just reading the blurb. I have limited knowledge of floodplain management laws, but I was like, I don't understand what this is doing. So I followed up with one of our section manager and one of our floodplain managers. Essentially, so it came out of the Office of Chehalis Basin that has,
Oh,
the flooding there. And the bill was actually, the original bill was Senator Braun. Who
Oh,
introduced
okay.
that. It's a small community, Bucota, I think,
Yep.
in Thurston County,
Yeah.
where essentially they're trying to give options to people who live in floodways that are at risk, where they can either, I think it's property owners or the local government can seek a waiver from ecology to be able to do some things in the floodplain that they otherwise wouldn't, including elevating their homes. So there's not any regulatory requirement. It's really just trying to grant some flexibility there, so that the WAC aligns with the new legislation, if that makes sense.
So
And I can send you
try
more.
and save some of these structures before the water comes in and takes some type of
Yeah,
thing.
yeah, because sometimes it's not practical to move out of the floodway for people for a lot of reasons, right? So one option would be to elevate.
Yeah, I'd say, so in my previous role, I was helping manage some of these these proposed changes, and it was really tricky because you want to acknowledge the people that are currently have flood risk and allow them to do some flood proofing, right? But you also don't want to expand development in a floodway. So it was really tricky trying to get into
Yeah.
some of those regulations where if you're taking a statewide approach, right, on regulations, it has to apply everywhere. And so we didn't want to magnify the risk in floodways, but also wanted to provide some sort of relief for the folks that are already there, already experiencing the impacts and want to do something about it. So,
Yeah. And I think that's actually, I grew up in Centralia, Chehalis area. So I remember where the Walmart and all that was, or before it was there, that's where water collected when they built all that up. Then other places were flooding. So I always tried to figure out, well, how do they know that it's going to go right? And I think that's what they're trying to address a little bit here.
yeah, just, again, give relief to folks who
Yeah.
are experiencing it and allow them to.
Being from Centralia, we always called Chehalis Swamp Town, so 'cause it's underwater. So.
It's complicated for sure. That's why we have a whole office associated with it.
It's like Kelso and Longview a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, a little bit of rivalry there. Another thing that piqued my interest, and I think Shauna works with the fish, was the salmon recovery and the toxic chemicals, the work they're doing with that, and just wondering how far along that is or what the expectation is there.
There's a couple of things that ecology has looked at. We're pretty involved with the 6 PPDQ stuff, that basically comes off of tires is what and they found that so there were coho salmon that were dying and they weren't sure why, that especially after like big rain events. And it was a researcher, might have been out of UW, but they basically narrowed it down to this chemical that's associated with pieces of tire that just come off in natural process. So there's that work. We've developed some water quality standards that kind of influence that. I've noticed, I live in Vancouver, and one of the things that I see more is the street sweepers that come and, just go through your neighborhood and sweep up all the debris and stuff. And I think that's tied to that to some extent. And then the other one that just came out recently is it's PBDE is the chemical. I don't know the full acronym for it or the breakdown of the acronym, but it's another chemical that I guess is from wastewater treatment. It bioaccumulates through the aquatic ecosystem, and then it's Chinook salmon that they looked at. It was Ecology, our EAP program, Environmental Assessment Program, was looking at effects on juvenile Chinook salmon of that. But what I read, I kind of did a quick read through the report, and they aren't finding a lot of mortality from that, like the 6 PPDQ. So I don't know what's going to come of it. It's just one of those things that they were assessing. They did find the source being treated wastewater. So it's coming through, the wastewater system. But so there's not really much, I don't know what the next steps will be with that, but they just finished the report. So that was published on our website.
I believe we also got an increase in funding to continue studying those different areas, because we're just, from what I understand, kind of scratching the surface of understanding what the impacts and which chemicals are causing what kinds of attribution to those impacts to fish. So we definitely are going to continue working on that, because it seems pretty significant.
It caught my attention because I have people and you've probably heard this too, Sean, people at Silver Lake always want that tested to see what's in there. Can't you take core samples? Can't you do this and this and try and see what's in there? So I didn't know how expansive ecology was going to be with this, how far they wanted to go.
Yeah, and I did follow up with, on Silver Lake with the citizen who was here, and we've had some back and forth. I've sent him a lot of information on, lake quality, and we haven't been able to attend they had I think it's coming up actually, sort of a workshop thing that they're having in Tootle.
Yeah, I think so.
And I had a conflict, and Jason did as well from our water quality program at VFO. But I told him, we're happy to share information on, like our water quality funding and things like that. I'm not really sure if we wanted to try to see if some of ecology staff could do some sampling there. I think there's usually a prioritization process. So I don't know. I know we did some work years ago, and then it just kind of sat there in reports, I think, and nothing was really done.
And it's on the grand scheme of things, I'm not saying this is a big thing. It's just because that's in District 3, and I do hear about that one, that I get my ear bent every so often.
Yeah.
And the other thing they worry about, and you're talking about wastewater creating some things, they worry about old septic systems that are out on the island that have been around for years and those type of things.
Yep.
Yeah. But to me, usually if a septic system goes, you pretty well know it pretty quickly if it's not operating.
Yeah, I believe the tracers of that too in the water, we would be able to detect, that source. Right?
Yeah. And Silver Lake does have elevated, it was temperature, I think PCBs as well. There's a few things like, I know I sent this in an email to, his name's escaping me. Joe? That doesn't, okay. Cause I looked it up on our water quality atlas. That lake's it's a little messed up. There,
When we adjust
Yeah.
the level of it, does that affect any of that?
I think there's different opinions on whether that works or not. They also they introduced the fish, the carp to try
Yeah.
to manage the vegetation. And then like on the one hand, reducing the vegetation does help with oxygenation a little bit, but then it also, if you reduce the vegetation, then you don't have anything anchoring the sediment, and the sediment's where a lot of the contaminants are. So it's kind of like, how do you balance that? So yeah, there's,
And that's another thing they talked to me about is the bottom, it's not solid anymore. And I think
it's
that's
turning
what you're,
marshy.
that's what you're talking about,
Yeah.
marshy, and it doesn't
Yeah.
control that. Interesting.
Where would the PCBs have come from?
I'm not sure. I don't know past uses there or,
That's,
yeah, I really couldn't say.
other than in transformer oil, I don't know what other use PCBs were used for. I can't imagine how in the heck PCBs could have got into that lake,
Yeah, lakes are really
especially in
tricky.
measurable quantities.
Yeah, they're really complex. I mean, there's a lot of concerns for a lot of lakes in the state that are going through, at least in the region, something I hear about too. Spanaway Lake being the most recent one where there was some fish deaths and pretty significant. And sometimes it takes like 6 ppdq is like years, and we still don't know exactly what the contributing causes are and how they're affecting how those chemicals are affecting fish. And so it can take a lot of different, it could take a lot of investment in terms of funding to do the research needed to identify that. And then sometimes it doesn't equate to any immediate answers. And I think that's really tough for lake environments. So it is something that I hear a lot. And again, the Spanaway Lake one, we were responding to a lot of different immediate interest around that. And there's no real clear answers. And it's really frustrating. And Fish and Wildlife has a role, ecology has a role. We have our authorities, but then, a lot of that lake management too is outside of our authorities, and just understanding the ecosystem as a whole and what the causes are of some of these things. And so it's really tough. I think a lot of people struggle with it.
That's always to me, an interesting dynamic. We had wildlife in last week, and I thought it was an interesting conversation. Commissioner Rader is really good on the outdoor stuff, and I thought he had some great questions. But I always wonder how, and I know you have responsibilities too when we talk about salmon habitat and that type of thing. And where does it intertwine, or where do they draw the limits, say, oh no, that's ecology, or you say, oh no, that's wildlife?
A lot of conversations sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes it's not as clear, and there's, partnerships where we both work on things together. And sometimes it's, depends on the issue itself and what authority it falls under and whose agency. But with the Spanaway Lake one, we were working directly with Fish and Wildlife because it was several complaints that were submitted through our state's, it's called our ERT system, our environmental reporting system. And so when it goes into that system, it comes through us, but then we network through all the different agencies that could have some role in responding. And so it is a statewide network, and that then triggers, Fish and Wildlife responding to us, DNR responding to us, all the different agencies, ag, who might have a role in addressing that issue that's been submitted to it. So the authorities are clear, but how we actually work on that usually is pretty collaborative between the agencies, depending on the issue. But yeah.
And I would just add that water quality is our, one of our largest programs, if not the largest. And because that's such an important variable for salmon recovery, cold, clean water, that, we play a big role in that. And then some of the floodplain stuff, but I would say water quality is like the biggest nexus for us with salmon recovery. I mean, right now on Lower Columbia Fish Recovery Board, which Commissioner Rader sits on, I'm on there, and then we have another ecology staff who's just recently joined as well from the water quality program out of Lacey. And actually, I was going to mention, because he's doing some water quality assessments, just for your awareness. Didn't think until now to make sure that you do know. He's doing assessments of several of the smaller tributaries to the Cowlitz. So like Arkansas, Ostrander, Alaqua, Delameter, all those, quite a few. I think he's on his second year of basically looking at, he's got temperature sensors, dissolved oxygen, those kind of parameters. And eventually with the goal being that we might do a, what's it called? The ARP, Alternative Restoration Plan,
Mhm.
which basically just is sort of like, here's some things for improving water quality. It could bump up prioritization with water quality funding from ecology, for restoration, of those water bodies. So.
Guys have anything you want to touch on?
Not really. I have a lot of thoughts going through my mind, particularly when we're talking about the lakes. Growing up in Texas, there's a lot of lakes, and the water's not clean. When I say clean, I mean it's murky. It's not clear like the waters that we have here. And we obviously have a different kinds of fish. But one of the main fish that's prevalent in those lakes is catfish, and catfish don't have scales, so they're pretty susceptible to stuff in the water, right? Because they're a smooth skinned fish. And that was one of the things that they used to say is you could judge the health of the lake based on how the catfish are, because they don't have that protective shell, if you will. And you know, I look at the lakes down there, and there's freeways going over the top of those lakes, around those lakes. I mean, just they're surrounded by freeways and houses and all sorts of stuff. And there was I remember talking to a game warden down there one time, and he said that we saw a bunch of fish that were dead on the bank, and he said, yeah, the lake turns over like every 5 to 7 years. And he tried to explain to me what it is. It's where the bottom sediment, for whatever reason, you know, goes to the top, and the heavy water goes down. And I'm not sure the terminology that he used, but he said, and that oftentimes causes quite a high mortality in fish. But he says it's a natural thing that happens, and it occurs so that the lake can maintain its ecosystem. You know, it's a naturally occurring event. And so I'm not sure how many things we have that occur in nature that are natural and how many of them are man caused. And I think ultimately that's the question that we want to get down to. Really, to what extent are we causing a lot of what's happening, and to what extent is a lot of it just natural, Mother Nature doing its thing? I mean, you know, we didn't have anything to do with the fact that there's not a saber-toothed tiger running around right now. So Mother Nature eliminates animals all on its own through natural processes. And to me, that's one of the, I would rather not see us trying to villainize something to protect a specific animal, and just find out really to what extent human beings are impacting Mother Nature, you know, and to what extent is it just natural? And the unfortunate side of it is that science, I said this before, science is a liquid. It's constantly in flux and in motion. You know, a lot of people think that it's stable, but it's really not. Like you guys have said, we just learned, Susan just said, oh, well, because we got more data now, what we thought to be true 10 years ago is no longer true. And so because science works that way, usually what happens is money's involved and politics get involved, and it just muddies the waters, you know, no pun intended on that. But, and that to me is one of the things that I would like to see. I would like to see politics get out of it, and the government get out of it, and have people who actually want to get to the solution of why things are happening, and not worry about any political implication, who's funding what. Unfortunately, the majority of science is funded by government. And so there's drawbacks to that.
Yeah, and I think, you know, exactly what we just said is often it's not as clear. I mean, there's no clear answers to some of this unless you spend a lot of money and spend a lot of time. And I think that's what's challenging in particular with our field, is trying to, you know, be careful as an agency too, of not making conclusive statements when the science isn't there
Yeah.
around what the contributing causes is. And it could be human, it could be natural, and that's what we're trying to understand more through these processes and the research that we do. We rely on others too. Our agency only has so much of a budget to actually conduct science, right, and collect data and do that work. So I think you're exactly right, though. It's tough. I mean, I think we know now could change in 10 years based on, look at the advances in technology, what we know now versus what we did even 5 years ago. It's amazing how much more we can collect and even the visualization tools that we have now, the data processing speeds, all that stuff is pretty incredible. So, is it perfect? Probably not. And I think there's a lot of unanswered questions that we continue to try and figure out. But there's a whole lot we're probably not going to learn for a lot longer too.
Well, and I appreciate you guys taking that approach. And that's one of the issues that I have with it is like, because we recognize that the system isn't perfect. We may find, we're spending $2.5 million to build a fancy named culvert. We may find out in 10 years that it really didn't make that much of a difference. And yet we're allocating a massive amount of public funds, taxpayers' money to these projects when it's kind of like we're just, I don't want to say whimsical. I don't know that that's the right word, but as Susan was mentioning with the models, garbage in, garbage out. And quite honestly, there's so many times that if you want to get a certain result in science, you just have to have the right amount of money and you'll get whatever result you want, when it comes to scientific research. So I appreciate you guys taking the approach that you're taking with it and understanding that it is a complex issue and one that I don't know that we're ever going to really resolve, but doesn't mean we give up and just roll over either.
Yeah, that's the role of policy, right? Is trying to do the best you can, make decisions in an unclear, uncertain, or unpredictable space. And at some point, you have to make those choices with information that you have of what are the risks, what's the risks associated with both sides. If we make this decision, we invest this money, what's the risk? If we don't, what's the risk? And that's where I step out of that arena. To some degree, it's up to the legislators and elected officials to make those decisions.
And the courts in some cases,
And
the
the courts,
culverts,
yeah.
A lot of that is driven by the court injunction,
Mhm.
right?
That was
So,
during my court case. Yeah, that's true.
Those culverts, excuse me, those culverts that have been letting fish get through them for 50 years, all of a sudden we're taking out a 6-foot culvert and put in a 20-foot span for millions of dollars for something that's been working just fine for 50 years. The fish haven't had any problem getting through it. But suddenly because somebody sees a fish upstream from the culvert, now all of a sudden we got to have some fancy complete redo on the thing and make it what somebody else believes is a better answer. I struggle with that. I don't mind when the culvert wears out. Okay, let's make it better than it was before. And as society grows, you might have to widen the road, so you need a longer culvert. But my God, some of the extravagant expenses we're going to are just off the
cost
wall.
is mind-boggling, and it just continues to increase, it's a lot of money. Yeah.
One of my favorite sayings is statistics never lie, statisticians often do. And I think that's getting us in more trouble than it's people's whims, it's not science. My 2 cents.
Yeah, and I think when wildlife was in, I was interested when they were talking about, when Commissioner Rader, when they started talking about the hoof rot and some of the questions, they're still trying to figure out, why is it elk? Why don't the deer have it? Why don't some of the other hooved animals have it? I have a place in Idaho. I've never heard one person in Idaho talk about elk having any of that over there. So why is it in our area and not over there? I think there's still a lot of questions there, and that was interesting to listen to, and they're still trying to figure some of that out.
Yeah, there's only so much money, and
Yeah.
the priority setting, that's where that happens at that legislative level and dictates kind of what we certainly prioritize in our agency, what we can spend
Yeah.
money on. And, we try to do the best we can to make sure that decision makers have the information, but that's our role.
Yeah.
You know, we have a little bit of latitude within some of the rules that we have, and we propose, you know, recommendations to the legislature to change or make improvements, but you know, it's tough when you're and things are just rapidly increasing in cost too, so it's.
Well, and it sounds like you guys are taking a collaborative approach to a lot of things, which we appreciate. I mean, you know, given the parameters that we have to work in, we're grateful to, you know, for you guys doing whatever you can do in a manner that is in the public's interest.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I mean, coming from a background of shoreline management, as a planner, you know, that's one of the strongest, one of the areas I know is one of the strongest partnerships with the state, local level. I mean, it's a home rule state. You know, we administer and we help communities develop shoreline master programs, and you implement them. We have some roles in that, but you know, often it's up to the local jurisdiction's decision-making authority on some of this. And,
Yeah.
you know, that's what holds true in my values, is trying to make sure we have a role as a state to help support communities in doing that. But there's no, you know, perfect way of doing it. Every community does it different. Every county does it different. Cities do it different. And,
Yeah.
but trying to allow that level of tailored approach to what matches the community's interest the best and also achieves what the state has given us as goals. I think, you know, that's where you see these really great accomplishments together. But we try, I mean, from an agency, I think we do try to be collaborative as much as we can. There's going to be decisions always where that need to be decided in the courts where there's disagreements, but you know,
Yeah.
we're trying to avoid getting there to that. And that's what this is about, right? Trying to create some trust, trying to build relationships. And so you can say, hey, this isn't working for us. At least that door.
That's what I was just gonna say, and I think these type of things are important. We're not always gonna agree or see eye to
Yeah.
eye, I'm sure, but at least we get to know each other and we get a comfort level of how we can work together. I mean,
Yeah.
if you had a need and we could fulfill it, we'd certainly try and do that. I have no doubt that
Yeah.
this commission would try and do that, so.
Yep. And the last thing we want to do is have you guessing why we made a certain decision. That's avoidable, right?
Yeah.
There's some things that are in our control, and that's one of them is
And,
be
and I,
transparent.
you get a lot of that, and we see that frustration from the public because they don't always hear how things come about, and then the frustration gets pushed out. It finally hits that point, right? And so I think, we've taken the tack of being really open with the public, and we're willing to discuss anything just so they understand where we're coming from. And I think, I would say over the last year or so, it's worked pretty well because we don't have a whole lot of controversy that really comes forward. They've kind of handled it before that period of time. Now watch next week, somebody will come up and blast us.
You just opened the ball.
Yeah.
The room's not full.
We start promoting this thing probably 3-4 weeks before and say, this is who we're gonna have, this is who we're gonna have. Come out and listen to them, and sometimes it happens and sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah.
But at least we're listening.
Yeah, it's definitely, I mean, it's something that that I've noticed in particular with the new director is that approach and really that value and making sure working with somebody well in advance of a decision, even being well in advance of a permit even getting submitted, so that the right pathways are identified. Everybody's on the same page, at least knowing kind of what the issues are, and just making sure we're providing really good customer service. We may not get there at the end, depending on what the issue is, but we can at least be providing really good technical assistance as part of our role as a state, helping all the public understand exactly what we're doing. So I certainly see that as a huge priority for Director Sixkiller, and it resonates really well with me. So I really appreciate that out of his leadership already.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's
I
not a
wouldn't even
lawyer,
say
by
that.
the way.
He's not
What's
a
that?
lawyer.
He's
Yeah.
not a lawyer.
Oh,
Like a
man,
lot of our directors.
He just went up a notch in my book right there.
So I think the first non-lawyer director that we've had in certainly 12 years, but I mean,
Sure.
it goes back
A
a long
while,
time.
yeah.
Well, you just pass on into the Commissioner Dahl Farrell and Rader just went up a notch in our book.
I would say that it's not even that the expectation is that we're always going to agree.
Yeah.
As long as we're working together, like you just said, we're collaborating and communicating. These are the issues that we're working through, because I don't think any of us expect you guys to agree with us all the time. That's not a realistic expectation. But the being able to collaborate with each other and know that, hey, you know where we stand, we know where you're going to stand, where you stand, and we know that you're going to do whatever you can to help us and establishing that relationship. And that's really all I would say that I would personally ask for is having that relationship to know that, yeah, you're going to work on our behalf in any way that you can.
And give you advance note. I mean,
Yeah.
you know, it's open communication.
Mhm.
You know, my cell phone, hopefully, you know, it's available anytime you want to give me a call and say, here's what I'm hearing. Tell me what's going on here. Like,
Yeah.
Give
and
me
just,
your number.
yeah.
Yeah.
Or if you just want us to gather information, there's something that you're curious about in between these meetings, you know, we're happy to get that,
Mhm.
so.
But we utilize it. When I talk in front of groups, once in a while, I'll give them a bad time. I said, you don't always have to agree with me. I'm a pretty open person. I'll tell you what I think. Your job is to decide whether you like it. Now, if you don't like it, I'll pray for you and hope you come around. But
Yeah, I may not answer the first time. So much spam on my phone now.
yeah,
I was counting up the other day. It's like an average of 12 calls, spam calls a day on my work phone.
Yeah.
It's like, what did Rich sign me
I-
up for
I-
here? Like,
Wow.
how do they end up getting all those numbers? It's just,
yeah,
I hear you.
People trying to sell you stuff.
Yeah,
probably. I don't know.
Well, they are listening to us on our phones, so.
yeah. Well, we appreciate your time and won't take any more of it today, but thank you again for coming up and visiting with us.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Thanks for having us. It's good
yeah.
to see you.
good to see both of you.
Yeah, and I think I'm sticking around. I've got a room here somewhere, cause I gotta get on a call at 3:30, so.
Oh,
So thank you for
you
offering that.
you
too.
got that settled for him?
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks, guys.
Do we have Travis coming in?
Yes.
Okay, so let's take a short recess and then we'll have Travis come in. Okay, we're back in this. So what do we got? We got IT coming is he on there? Okay. So we're all kind of sitting here in the dark. We're not sure what this is about. It was called, so you guys don't have to bring us up to speed.
Yeah, there's Travis on.
There you are.
Good afternoon.
Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon.
You'll have to bring us up to speed. We're not sure what we got going.
Okay. So I requested this to make you aware of a current cyber threat and what we're dealing with and what we're doing about it. And I wanted you to be aware. So I'll go into explaining what that is if you're ready to, and you can hear me okay. I guess I
Yeah.
should introduce myself. This is Travis Fiskini, IT Director. Okay, so roughly 2 months ago, we started seeing a particular type of threat and suspicious network activity. It was being reported to us by a network monitoring device we have and a state network monitoring sensor. And those events were sparse in between, a little bit irregular, slightly concerning. Over the past 2 months, our concern increased as those events started to increase in frequency. Roughly, we were getting roughly a handful a day, went to kind of, we're from a handful a week to a handful a day. And then last Friday, we saw a dramatic spike. And then there were tens of thousands of these reported network flows to the internet. And they were being reported as suspicious because of the destinations that were being, the destination networks that we were communicating with.
Travis, did you say tens of thousands?
Tens of thousands, that's correct. on
Okay.
Friday afternoon. You know,
Yeah,
they
that's
could
what-
be very small pieces of data, but it's when you assemble or when you look at that many, you clearly have some reason for concern. And when you see a spike of that nature, there's reason for concern.
Do we, Travis, when you, pardon my ignorance, tens of thousands of what to where?
Yep. There were tens of thousands of network flows. So, you know, those could be small, they could be large. And they were coming from inside the Cowlitz County network to destinations that were on the internet with known bad reputations. So they get a bad reputation based on things that are observed by others going in and out of those. So some of them may have bad reputations for years, some may have reputations for months or days, and some are worse than others based on the types of traffic or the threat actors that are associated with those addresses.
Do we have any way of tracking or knowing where those things originated within the county network?
Since we started seeing these over the past couple of months, we've been trying to understand where they're coming from, and that was difficult to ascertain. We've been making good progress on that within the past week. However, it is difficult to determine. One of the things that we observed was that the traffic was coming from many hosts, not just a small number, but many. Dozens, at least 100, maybe hundreds. We started investigating some of those machines very specifically and were unable to find anything to explain why that traffic would be coming from those particular hosts. I'll
We can't
continue, but I
narrow
want to
it-
make sure I answer your questions too.
We can't narrow it down to a specific computer or server or some dead center location that we know.
We have narrowed it down, but we've narrowed it down and we see evidence of information coming from more than 100 addresses on the network.
So this is not like a virus?
It could be, but what we're seeing kind of indicates that the virus is widespread, and that would seem to indicate, and because there are commonalities among multiple devices, that would suggest that there's lateral movement, that something inside of the network continue to propagate to other devices to generate similar behavior on other devices.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure.
I don't know what to do with that information yet, but
Well, I can tell you what I was kind of prepared to make you aware of what we've seen and then kind of what we've been doing and maybe what we would recommend doing moving forward. But I want to pause there and just make sure that you're kind of caught up and have a general understanding of what we're seeing and what that means.
So has this increased activity, has it caused any issues within our network at this point? Or are we just noticing that this increased activity is happening?
Fortunately, we've not seen significant impact. And it's hard to tell whether or not what we're seeing is likely to lead to something at any moment, whether or not it's something like a nation state actor exfiltrating data. There are suggestions that by reputation that there are nation state actors linked to and have observed activity with some of these same addresses that we're seeing that have bad reputations. There's also a question of whether or not it's e-crime, whether somebody's doing it for profit and whether or not they just haven't caused impact yet because maybe they're waiting till they can do maximum damage and have maximum impact. With something like ransomware, you know, if they were to shut down every machine versus shut down 100 machines, right, we would be more inclined to pay the ransom. It could also be that there is indications of command and control where we are seeing activity in the network or addresses that suggest that there are things communicating inside and outside of our network that could be controlling things within our network. That could be for lots of reasons. There could be somebody out there trying to sell access, to malicious actors. It's hard to tell at this point. There's just a lot of bad addresses, and it's hard to tell exactly what the source is or the purpose.
So I see several of these 10 top threats that you listed on this email, that some of them are malware, some of them are phishing, some of them are unknown. Apparently, they're a medium threat. And I don't know what Army, that's just an extension, apparently.
Yeah, there's, everything on the internet, almost everything on the internet is addressed in numbers, but you commonly access it by name. And there can be, a wild combination of names. What you're seeing there is a combination of names. Sometimes those names are as simple as google.com, news sites, other things that you're familiar with. But a lot of those names are kind of deviations or variations of names that are popular and well-known. And they can be used for very nefarious purposes. The ones that are on there in that report that you're seeing those have a poor reputation, and those are not legitimate. And that's why those are particular examples that are cited on that report.
Okay. Where do we go from here?
Okay. Sorry, was there another question?
No?
Okay, great. Over the past week, particularly since Friday afternoon, we've been trying to perform a lot of investigative work, including working long days through the weekend. The team has pulled together very well, right? Our intent here is to find the source of the threat, remediate the threat, find the source, contain it, remediate it. Finding the specific source, it seems very widespread. We really want to be Smokey the Bear, right? We want to fight this and prevent it from causing a large fire or being worse. We don't want to be in a situation where we're firefighters, so we're doing what we can to be as proactive as we can under the circumstances. We've implemented more effective monitoring, alerting. We've consulted with the Center for Internet Security, and they have a SOC. That SOC, and that's provided to state and local tribal governments for at no cost. They're funded largely through grants, and their CERT service. Their CERT service did investigation and analysis of several hosts that we saw traffic on that were suspicious. We've increased our protection by looking for gaps where we didn't have protection already and covering them. Where we didn't have endpoint protection installed, we've been installing that. We also engaged risk, I think probably in the past couple days, because we recognize that this is probably at a point where we're dealing with experts, most likely, or seasoned pros. And this is something where in the cyber world, we're probably amateurs, and it's probably getting to a point where we need to engage experts in order to do forensics analysis to find the source of this. Typically, that would be in what I'll call an IR or incident response type engagement. And that's what we're proposing to move forward with. We started discussing with the legal team here what that would look like and what our options are, because there's lots of concerns with that. One of those is, for example, it's hard to move forward with some of the options that would be presented and proposed in an IR engagement within the funding constraints through the typical procurement channels. And so we needed to know how to proceed and what the impact of that would be. So I've, over the past few days, been in contact with a number of vendors, received a number of proposals to assist us in moving forward. Those 3 leading proposals, one of them comes from CrowdStrike, who is a vendor that is recommended or a preferred vendor from the risk pool. When we reached out to the risk pool, they got a list of vendors from the insurance company that they utilize. One of those vendors is also, CrowdStrike is also a leading vendor for incident response based on some market analyst reports that I've also cross-referenced. Arctic Wolf is another vendor. We've consulted with them. their tool and their methodology is one of the least expensive, but they're not recommended by the risk pool. They also don't have the same comprehensive coverage. They're not necessarily considered the best in class, but they do have a less expensive option. Velocity is another one. I have firsthand experience with them working at another very large company in multiple incidents, and they have a less expensive option, similar to the cost of Arctic Wolf. Their option is specializes in one type of forensic analysis that's kind of complementary to CrowdStrike's. One is focused on the network, one is focused on the endpoint, and I would recommend moving forward with those two options. Because of the cost of the Velocity option, I think that we can find a fast path forward, provided that I can get assistance from the legal team and reviewing the terms and the purchasing team, because the cost of that, I think, is probably within our budgetary authority. The CrowdStrike option and proposal that came in is not. That option is I think just over $100,000, and that would typically suggest that we need to go out for RFP. I don't know how long that would take, but I'm a little concerned that if we need to wait for an RFP, that would take probably days or weeks or more. And while that would be great because we would get lots of options presented, I'm concerned about the time that would take. So that's kind of a summary of what we've been doing and what I would recommend and the challenges that we have moving forward.
Travis, do we know what kind of data has been flowing? Do we know if we've lost anything or what it is?
We do not. At this point, it's unknown. It's also hard to quantify. I think we've taken good steps to contain and slow down the activity, and yet it's hard to know that. We just haven't had the ability to, we don't have the right tools in place to assess that well.
This might be a question for legal, but is there any way we can do a hybrid, go with CrowdStrike initially, and then have a more comprehensive, answer if we have to go to RFP, but just so that we can get on this immediately?
Well, I think he was saying CrowdStrike was the expensive one that would trigger an RFP unless we declared an emergency or.
So this is tiptoeing into areas of executive session. I will say that you're correct in the sense that CrowdStrike is the more expensive of the two options. The Velocity, according to the terms that Mr. Ficini stated, is significantly less.
Yeah, but I think you're right, Jason. We're starting to talk about move into contract negotiations almost, it feels like. And I think you're probably right. We should probably move that to executive session and take.
Before we do that, can I ask a
Yeah,
question?
absolutely.
Travis, this report you gave us, this MSISAC Multi-State Information Sharing and Analysis Center, are they still monitoring our system?
They are still monitoring our system. However, because of the volume of activity, they have discontinued alerting because it was so excessive. They couldn't, more or less, they couldn't keep up. It was no longer valuable or beneficial to continue creating individual incidents. They couldn't respond to the individual incidents. They basically stated they're no longer willing to continue providing additional information until we've remediated the current circumstance yeah.
So is it safe to assume that based on this report you've given us that the problem is continuing to escalate, or is it leveled off?
I think I would say what I know is that it's evolving. And I think that report reflects a measurement and quantifies the data in one particular way. I'm not certain. I would suspect that what we've done may contain or reduce that. We're also in the process of working with them to implement an additional service which will mitigate the specific thing they're reporting there, because they're reporting on one very specific type of traffic. I think we're able to mitigate or contain that. The challenge is that there's already a foothold, there's already some sort of bad actor or threat within the environment. And I think they're evolving, and I think there's other types of activity, and that's what we're trying to fight and figure out right now.
Okay. All right.
Okay. So let's convene to executive session for contract negotiations. What do you think, guys? 10, 15?
I think at a minimum, yes, 15.
Okay.
The board is extending the executive session for a period of 15 minutes until 2:18 p.m.
Back from executive session, I don't know. No decisions were rendered. I'll turn over to you. You were gonna.
Thank you. Jason Lorraine with the prosecutor's office. Following executive session, we discussed particulars of need and contracting. And it was determined that a specific contract or a specific vendor would address the very needs that we have as a county to prevent certain malicious domains from continuing to impact or disrupt our internet functions. It is our understanding that the IT director, Travis Foschini, contacted Washington County's risk pool and requested a list of preferred vendors. These vendors had prior evaluations by the risk pool. Mr. Foschini performed his own evaluation of those given our needs. And based on that evaluation, he presented to the board a specific vendor, CrowdStrike. Based on what has occurred so far, it seems that the competitive bidding and negotiation process was satisfied by WCRP. The vendor is CrowdStrike, and given that the contract terms includes a price that under policy requires board approval, we now need to have Mr. Foschini put on record exactly with specificity what his need is and what he has performed and how it is that this specific vendor is going to satisfy that need so that board can make approval of any contract above limits.
All right, I just joined as a panelist. I think you're waiting for me to speak. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. All right, this is Travis Foschini, IT Director. I think I'm responding to the question of, or providing specificity on why the recommendation to contract with CrowdStrike is being presented. After evaluating the incident response vendors and looking at those who are best of breed and provide the type of services that we need, it was determined that CrowdStrike is one of the leading vendors based on industry reports. They also have leading, well-known throughout the industry, a leading tool used for malware detection and malware prevention. And that tool will also be utilized here. And they were also one of the vendors that were recommended by the risk pool. And the combination of being a leading vendor in the industry, from my own knowledge, also and experience, but also from industry analyst reports like Forrester. I am recommending that we move forward with them.
I think we would just entertain a motion up to a max dollar amount. I think 150 is what we talked about.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we authorize Travis to move forward with CrowdStrike and work with them up to $150,000 to resolve this issue.
Okay. We have a motion to approve Travis working with CrowdStrike. See anything? We'll call for a vote. Those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anything else, gentlemen? Think we're good?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Travis.
Yep, thank you.
Keep us updated.
Will do. If you'd like updates at any given time, feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Jim, you must have something? Well, we're way over time, but yeah.
I don't have my external microphone, so you kids are hard to hear. It's terrible in here, except those gentlemen, I saw the acoustics. I have two requests, if I may, please. First off, Mr. Ritter, pleasure to see you again. I met you at the Gallus River Conservation Project, and Mr. Farrell, I've met on many occasions over the last 40+ years in this development. I am chairman for the Conservation District of Cowles County, and I have been serving on that board for 15 years as supervisor, and bringing on board my specialties, which I developed with a project that I developed for the county, which was a reclamation remediation project for the Cowles River, managing the sediment and the sewer lines. That's another discussion.
Turn your mic on, Jim. Turn the mic on. Right in the middle of the bottom.
It's green.
Okay. It should light up. Okay.
Nevertheless, I vacated in June 1st of this last year, the department that I created, and at the county's request. And in so doing, I was promptly locked out of my office. Now, there was no just cause, there was no termination as far as any misconduct, there was nothing raised. The issue was strictly, I was defunded, and that's fine. That's the prerogative of the counties. But when they locked up my office, I was treated in such a way that I couldn't retrieve my personal effects. And the next morning came back to retrieve my library, and I had set up temporary office down in the basement. And so I got here to find that some of my stuff was boxed and set out in the public aisleway. I have a very expensive library that I've earned for the last 50 years. And because I've studied, excuse me, composting, environmental science, my specialty and minor was fish. But I've worked for the county the last 38+, and with a small break in between, with a career in law enforcement, ultimately with Cowles County Public Works. And then I developed the idea for the reclamation and was given the go for it. So what I'm asking for is, I was required to file a paper to retrieve my paperwork, my research, all of my stuff. And I was told I had to pay for copies. And this is not county property. Some of it might be on Xerox paper, but most of it's all at my expense. There are research papers that I've done all across the country and communicated with the designers, et cetera, as I refined my project. Key to today is a stack of papers that I can't see if that's Bailey there or not. So my training papers for conservation, very distinctively conservation paperwork. When you train as a supervisor, they send you off to school, which is great. And you receive tutorial sheets that are sealed in plastic. They're supposed to last you for as many years. Well, I've been now more than 15 years, and I refer to those things quite often. Now that I'm chairman, I'm got a lot more responsibility. I want my daggum paperwork. I don't feel like I should have to pay for it because it belongs to the state conservation. And so I'm asking, please, would you so advise you're very dutiful and very assistive secretaries, please. Will you relinquish me back my property? It's not proprietary to you in any way whatsoever. In fact, there are 4 white, yellow, and black totes filled with a ton of my work that is non-proprietary. And I've gone to the county rules and it falls under standard definitions for proprietary, yet I'm told the county deems it proprietary and I have to pay for each and every copy. Ain't gonna happen. I'll just abandon it, you type of thing. So I'm asking, please, may I have my paperwork? There are tools, et cetera, that the county confiscated that are mine. But I'm asking for a second opportunity to meet with you gentlemen, excuse me, over the other property and effects and negotiating, if you want to say it that way, the final separation from the county. It was called terminated instead of defunded. It's an interesting read, but I'm asking for another appointment with the 3 of you. I got off work today to pay my taxes, and so the chance here.
Everything we've done with that went through the attorney. Everything we done with that was strictly by their direction. And so I'm not changing attorney's direction. If the attorney wants to change their direction and offers some other way of doing it, we'll certainly listen to that, but I'm not going against their suggestion and their recommendations.
I would like the attorney then to post his interpretation of authorizing him to advise you to seize my personal effect.
You work for the county. It's like when I left the credit union, everything I did for them was done for them and I didn't grab up my stuff and go. I mean, I grabbed my coat and stuff like that and pins. But the work I did for them was for that institution. You did a lot of work for the county that it becomes part of the county. That's the interpretation that came to us.
And the presumption is that they paid for it.
Well, if we paid a salary for how many years?
Wait for my department, sir, just under a year. I would love to be able to.
You were employed by the county for longer than a year.
38.
Yeah.
But I developed that department and got the go-ahead from the commissioners. Just before that June, it would have been 1 year, July.
Well, I'm not going to sit and belabor this point because we run it by the attorney. We ran every single thing we did by the attorney. And I'm not changing it. You're not going to get me to change anything. I mean, if the attorney wants to change something, that's up to him, but it's not up to me.
Then bring him forward. We need to have a hearing.
Well,
Because I do know and have read, sir, and have worked in 3 different capacities for this county, the reach of the attorney, but not to argue. But the conservation stuff is pretty obviously not yours, and I am requesting. Could I please?
do we give funds to the conservation district?
I'm sorry.
Do we give funds to the conservation district? Do we help support that entity? The answer is yes. Yeah,
But do you know what you agreed to buy for that? Obviously.
Jim, we've had this conversation times before. This is just a repeat. You're in here because you got two new commissioners that you're hoping to swing your way. And I actually find this fairly offensive because we've been through this. You know what they've said. We've done everything that they told us. We did it by the book. And you're wanting us to change, and you want to change because you got two new people you think you can talk to. We'll talk to them, but quit wasting our time here.
Excuse me? Okay, I did not come to divide you. I actually came for the conservation material, which is rightfully theirs through me. So, anything else, gentlemen?
Well, I don't know a whole lot about it, but I wish will say this, when I retired from the mill, all of the training that they sent me to, all of the manuals and everything, the mill considered that to be their property. So I had to leave all that there. I got to take my certificates that I graduated from that class, but that was all I got. All the manuals and everything for all the electrical drives and GE training and et cetera, that I went through. I didn't get to have any of the manuals or the notes or anything I took through that training. So if that's similar to this, I guess I don't know.
It is not.
Okay,
And no, I'm not trying to argue. Really, I'm not.
I understand.
Yeah. All I can tell you is, I designed a shop in your Public Works Division. That was valued at a little over $500,000. Most of the materials in there I donated. All of the time that it spent building that, I did. And I donated, I was paid for my regular job. But it had nothing to do with making the safest shop in the nation that got federally recognized. And I don't have a problem walking away when I retired out, leaving all my stuff behind because it was built for my safety and my successors. Sometimes take a look at it. I don't mind saying somebody going, well, proprietary wise, you know, you built this here. It doesn't make any difference that it's your farm materials that did it. I'm purposefully throwing that out there because that can be construed as proprietary. Even though I didn't get one single donation or the only recognition I ever got was federal. Afterwards, county finally came in with accolades out there. But I did that for the people. So, and it's the same thing. County was asked to put me on the federal board for education for chemical or herbicide specialists. I didn't want to, and I went on to lead that while doing my regular job, 3,100 educational recipients, students, and we built up a reputation with the state that they came to us. And yet, all of the information, all of the data I put together to do that was on my time. But I gladly never liked herbicides. That you have a right to. It's built on your premises. But I've got books in there on fish that were my stuff in college 5 years ago. I've got papers in there shared by different researchers back and forth as I tried to lead the collaborative to do the right job and to actually get busy and do a job. And that's dredging and soil stabilization, et cetera. That's what I do. So I've experienced Mr. Dahl never before in this conversation. It's my first time actually talking to you. And I was, I'm not humiliated, I'm old. That's what's nice about this mess. I do know what proprietary property is, and your attorney didn't advise you unless you made a phone call, because I'd gladly talk to him and show him what the proper definition application is.
Wait, help me understand if these were things that you were doing on your time. If this was stuff that you were doing on your time and it's your property, why was it here at the county?
lived out of temporary offices once I left Public Works. I never really left Public Works. I was asked to develop my project. And so was starting to put together a program that I had to authenticate and get permitted. Okay. And so finally the commissioners gave me that opportunity. 1 year just before I left. Everything prior to that, I could take hours, and I promise not to. I was asked to get rid of Scott's broom off of those ash spoils. Nobody else knows how to do it. So I figured it out. Didn't have any time. I was doing 1,150 miles of roadway 3 times a year doing my weed abatement for your shoulder, maintaining shoulder, road quality. I was also handed, I did maintenance on several creeks. The first, they got the largest grant ever for not weed eradication, not weed eradication on the Monahan, the Abernathy, and the Lewis. All of that got done because I'd have to stay after work because there was too many miles of it, and we were being paid on a limited accounts. So I did it. That's just me. In the meantime, I still had to develop a shop that was the most healthy shop in the world. It made me sick to walk in, but I needed a job, so I cleaned it up. A couple hours early in the morning, stay a couple hours after night, and a couple of hours the missus chewing my out, but that's always been me. With all that work from my time. And I developed this project. Do a heck of a lot of pushing time.
Okay.
All my studying material is all in my part. I did not get paid, contrary to what they wanted to say. I never got paid for squat, except my regular spray job. But it was fun to work from my office and develop the national contacts and all of the scientific other projects out there that I studied to bring it to a pool to come up with an answer that is actually very viable. So I apologize for my speech. I don't have it good anymore unless I can really sit close to someone. So thank you, Mr. Dahl, but I'm not quite certain what to say now. But I would like my stuff back, please. And do you have tools, 2 rifle cases of mine that held my soils tools? That's what I do. The biggest one that really ticks me off is state gave me 2 aquatic mowers that had been decommissioned because they were falling apart. And they drove them down here for recycling. Got permission from their bosses to give to me because I was such a do-it-yourselfer, rebuild and did things. And use them. And so they're sitting down there and I have to show receipts. Okay. Don't have receipts. I don't have receipts for half the things that she said I had to show proof of that I bought these books. My God. You can't. It's not a discussion with that attorney. That didn't occur. So nice to see you. Invitations are going out. I'll be putting on a dog and pony show is what I call them. Up on LT1. And Senator Murray wants me to try for mid-May. Dates have been bounced around quite a bit. I'm at their mercy, but they're asking me to put on a show for her. Congresswoman Perez, and we would be inviting yourselves as well. And every department affiliate, DFW, DOE, I know you know Bubek, Shauna, Hanish. And so it's going to be, the push is, I was at the time that I was defunded, I had a work order in effect with the Army Corps. And it was being amped up to be under regulatory, and I was negotiating.
Now you're getting into lying territory, because we called down and couldn't verify one of that. When I asked you for it, you couldn't give it to me. You said,
Number one, you
absolutely
never even
not.
Spoke to me.
You know, we're done. You're just gonna sit here and, you know, that's county property out there. If you're gonna go out there, then you should have permission from the county if you're gonna drive
Well, I would
around
love to
that
listen
stuff.
to you wander and meander, and I really sit back in total amazement, where in the heck you came
We're
up with
done.
your
We're
information.
done. It's, if you want something,
I did. I do want something.
yeah, and it, you know, oh, I don't even get, I'm so tired of the argument with
Call
you.
down there.
You,
I'm gonna use your language. You did not call down to Army Corps. Neither did Public Works.
yeah,
They
they
called
did.
the Portland office and I issued a complete write-up.
You've never been able to show us a thing that you say you got. Never. Absolutely never.
You did get them, sir.
No, you didn't.
Yep.
I sit right there and ask you, you got the permit? I want to see it. No,
Well,
you can't see
No one
it.
has a permit until it's negotiated.
you said you had to permit. You told multiple people you had a permit.
Which was
You told
road
multiple
permit.
people you had $400,000 from them down there and you didn't have a dime. You just don't tell the truth, my friend.
One
And
thing,
that's
sir,
the struggle I have
would
with you.
Appreciate as a public servant retired, that you knock off with the friend stuff.
Well,
Because Army Corps had through Department of, called it
Yeah.
DFW,
you're just so full of nonsense.
a permit to do.
We're
that.
just, we're done. We're gonna adjourn this meeting. We're done with it. We're adjourned.
Anyway,